introduce the program. Okay, thanks, Sherry. I just want to introduce our program tonight. It's kind of a continuation of the conversation we just had. You know, as we watch what's going on, we know that media outlets, journalists, both national media as well as local media, are under threat again by this dictatorial administration that we have. And we wanted to explore, and bring our supporters in to have this discussion with folks who keep a closer eye on what's going on in the media than we do as a daily basis. Like I said, I get to find out what's going on in the world after 5 o'clock, most times after 6 o'clock, but some folks are paying much closer attention, and I want to hear, I want to learn, and I hope you are here for the same reason. So our panelists tonight, Lori Glenn, who has her own firm, consulting and public relations, public information, public engagement firm, is going to moderate our conversation tonight. And our panelists will be a longtime friend of mine, a former work colleague of mine, a former CWTA board member, Sylvia Ewing, who I think everyone knows. Sylvia is all over the place. If you watch TTW in the last decade, you couldn't be on TTW and not know Sylvia. But she now is with Public Narrative. She has a new role that has her watching and really commenting on and giving some strategy.
Jackie, you're muted.
I've been doing all this talking. Will you mute it?
Just for about 10 seconds.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you. I don't know how I did that.
You said enough about me anyway. You could keep it rolling.
All right. So Tracy Bain, again, like Sylvia, is very familiar. If you have done anything or known anything about what's going on with our LGBTQ community, Tracy had her newspaper that kept us up, at least since I was a pup, what was going on. And then she went over to the Reader. And the Reader is like a Bible for a lot of folks in neighborhoods who want to know what's going on locally in arts and culture as well as news. And now she is leading a new program at the Chicago Community Trust that again is focused on neighborhood media and what's going on there. And so we're going to hear more from them as they respond to Lori's questions. And I'm going to shut up so you can hear from folks who know more than I do. And Lori's going to let you know about presentations as well as questions and things of that sort. So Lori, it's all yours. Take it away. And I'm shutting up.
Thank you, Jackie. Well, I've known Jackie Grimshaw a very long time, and it was really a real pleasure and honor for her to ask me to, and Judith, to moderate. But I do want to start out with a shout out to someone who had a very similar firm that I have, Marilyn Katz. And I want to just say that I'm sure Marilyn would have a lot to say about, well, she had a lot to say about everything, but she certainly would have a lot to say about the free media. So I just want to give a shout out to her because she is someone who's made a difference in many people's lives and many issues. So I have a lot of people I know on this particular Zoom, so it's kind of funny, but I'm Lori Glenn. I have Thinking, which is a political and public affairs consulting firm, and I've been a consultant for more than 40 years. Actually, today I was as well at the power lunch for Jan Schakowsky, who I've known Bob Kramer and Jan since I was 19, and I ran bingos on the Northwest side of Chicago for the Illinois Public Action Council. So it was very bittersweet, but Jan will always be in the game, so to speak. And again, someone we owe so much to for her political prowess and voice. So I ran electoral campaigns actually in my 20s, and I have specialized in strategic communications since I was 28. So it's been a long time that I've worked in the comms business. And our job at Thinking is really to use strategic communications as a tool to build power and influence for the community voice. We often say that our work is about transferring power from those who have too much of it to those who need more of it. And communications, it's a tool for leveling the playing field, as we know, for giving voice to the voiceless. So we have used the media to, so to speak, as a tool for building power and influence. Now, what happens when that tool in the toolkit goes away? How do I, as a public affairs consultant, which really our job is to use communications again to influence key target audiences. And if the traditional media no longer exists, do we just have to live in the land of social media and people's opinion versus facts? I mean, this is really a huge issue. I think about it a lot because our goal has been to build social movements, and communications in a very broad sense is about getting an idea across and influencing the influencer. And we've used the traditional media as a way to give credibility to our organizations, our clients' ideas, and what happens when that goes away. That, unfortunately, is a potential reality. I did a little data collecting. In the United States, approximately 127 newspapers closed in 2024. And it's estimated that over 3,200 newspapers closed since 2005. And that translates to a loss of an average of 2 newspapers per week in recent years. Illinois, well, we've been particularly hit hard. The state lost 86% of its journalists since 2005, which is the highest decline in the nation, according to the Medill State of Local News that they reported on in October 2024. It said that Illinois disproportionately lost the largest number of newspaper jobs because of the corporate chains that owned them. Now, this is just one example in the newspaper business. We know every time I call TV stations, they say to me, we've got smaller crews, Lori. We don't know if we can get out there. And obviously, there's been a huge issue at radio stations. We're looking at the Trump administration attempting to slash and burn NPR and PBS. So these are real issues that all of us are dealing with. And not only are there less media outlets to distribute information, as we know, they're more siloed and separated. So we no longer have a national narrative. As we know, Walter Cronkite would not exist today. So we have less places to actually distribute information. We have more advocacy journalism and spaces that have a point of view and not necessarily just the facts, ma'am, kind of perspective. So given this climate today, with the kind of fractured politics that we have, the extremism, the lack of fact checking, how do we move forward in creating a democracy that depends upon having an educated electorate? Now, that said, what do you see, Tracy, as our next steps here? You joined Press Forward Chicago. I want to know, tell us, please, about this and what you see the vision is for maintaining a free press and what that means for all of us. And so glad you're here. Thank you.
I'll take off a chunk of that because I can't take off that whole writ large, everything you just said. But Press Forward Chicago is where I'm now working. It's hubbed at the Chicago Community Trust, and it was stood up by about 15 foundations a year and a half ago. MacArthur Foundation and the Chicago Community Trust are the two main ones, but many other local ones. In addition, MacArthur Foundation has stood up with the Knight Foundation out of Miami, a national press forward, and I'm going to paste some links in the chat in a minute. And there are now nearly 40 separate press forward chapters around the country. The goal is to have one in at least every state. In Illinois, we have Press Forward Chicago, and we also have Press Forward Springfield. There is also a press forward in Northeast Iowa that bleeds over into the Quad Cities, a part of Illinois, and we're hoping that there'll be one soon, perhaps in Lake County. So there are press forwards across the country. Each of them are run independently, and our goal is to support local media. Even the goal of the national press forward is to support local media. And support can take a lot of can look a lot of different ways. But the main thing is to try to make the media ecosystem that they are part of stronger. And in Chicago, this is how it looks. We just finished a survey, which we'll be releasing soon, where we asked 114 local community-owned media, so not the Tribune and broadcast TV, but yes to BEZ, Sun Times, and below that, what their needs are. What would they like to share services on? What are their capacity building, audience needs, business needs, software needs, you name it. We have hundreds of data points, and we're going to start leaning into supporting back-end shared services, trainings, you name it, partnering with organizations like the one Sylvia's with, Public Narrative, with Medill, and other organizations and for-profits to try to stand up a stronger community media ecosystem. For me, all politics is local, all news is local. Everything bubbles up from there. The Flint, Michigan water crisis was a local story that bubbled up nationally. And then you look to how the trends are across the country with clean water. Well, that's what I believe in is local, strong local media. The national media right now, I'm not saying it's a lost cause. There are other people that can try to fix that. Money has corrupted it in such a way that it makes it really difficult for people to continue to listen to those voices. So what we at least have is a local media ecosystem that we can make stronger from rural America to the city areas. There are ways that we can help. Luckily, the costs of creating news have gone down almost 1,000% since I started 41 years ago, which means the means to get to people is more accessible. But how we amplify it and support all kinds of voices. I am very neutral to the platform. If you deliver your news through TikTok or WhatsApp or whatever it may be, and that's accurate news and information you're sharing, that's legitimate. Podcasts are legitimate. And we need to make sure we're not trying to kind of dictate the processes as much as we are supporting those who are creating it.
Thank you. Sylvia, I know you joined Public Narrative, and that's such a great thing for them. They're so lucky to have you. Why don't you tell us a bit more about what you think is the responsibility of communities and people in our communities to ensure free media? What does it mean for community-based organizations you're working with, as well as the media, what can they do? What can we do to ensure there's a free media still?
Thank you. And if you don't mind, like Tracy, I'd love to just give a little bit of an opening statement to set both my perspective and a little bit of context. I spent a few decades working on both sides of the microphone, doing the work similar to what you do, helping nonprofits tell their stories and helping to tell those stories in broadcast and television and print. And I'm here to say that we are at the best of times and the worst of times, in that when we look at legacy media, things were not perfect. We always had bias. We always had point of view. We always had fewer Black women or people of color or women leading newsrooms, leading editorial shops. And what we see now with the advent of the implementation of Project 2025 is frightening, but not insurmountable. With my work at Public Narrative, I'm bringing some of the perspective that I had when I used to teach the business of media and the business of broadcasting at Columbia. We've always had business consolidation. We've had financially driven perspective. People might remember sweeps when you get all the scary stories because the ratings are being measured to determine what you're going to charge for your broadcasting. And so I say this to say we're not coming out of a world of perfection. We see a narrative shift and we see a generational shift. Walter Cronkite up to Dan Rather, up to you name it, it's a different world, and people are um, choosing and curating their news in a way that doesn't always allow for broader perspective or other points of view. And I see that as being a continued danger. But with public narrative, it's been around since 1989. It's a Chicago based nonprofit that brings together media and the nonprofits that want to tell their stories to strengthen that ecosystem. We inherited part of Tracy's vision with the Chicago Independent Media Alliance, which we are the administrators for and the stewards of. And it is a way to collaborate differently. And so, my offering for everyone who is just overwhelmed, angry, frightened, um, can't believe this is happening, it's not that Project 2025 was so brilliant, it was just that it was strategic, that there are many little heritage foundations that are implementing and trying to make things stick on the wall that they planned, and a lot of that ties to media. I think that there are new spaces where we will tell those stories. I think that there are growing organizations like Laura's project, the investigative project on race and equity. There's organizations like Respire Media, which is giving a complex look at what happened in Altgeld Gardens and the birth of environmental justice. I think there are just new faces and spaces, and it's up to all of us who are providers of media to be accurate, to be fact-based, and to be independent, but it's up to all who are consumers to be well-informed consumers, to also know when to take a media break for your mental health, and to be well aware of what is factual and strong. And so we're continuing to empower local media. We're continuing to help in the area of collaboration and working together with new partnerships. And we want to foster sustainability. And the good news I see coming from Chicago with Press Forward National, with SEMA and Public Narrative, with work that's going on at Medill, we're thoughtfully looking at new ways to do things, because that's change, that's survivable, that's sustainability. And I don't know that we'll ever have a world where people will not be micro targeting and hyper curating their experience in silos, but we can be better informed and know how to share media analysis and try to see behind the veil of what we're being told. So I'll stop there as my opening and get to all your questions.
So actually, starting Tracy, what do you think, given what you're doing now, what does it mean to be the quote unquote free independent press today?
Well, most local media are free and independent, free not necessarily in financial, but most are free financially too. Um, we Even in the case of sometimes BEZ Lavaz, they are a nonprofit now, which makes them much more independent than they used to be, perhaps as having owners. The Sun Times has gone through lots of other owners over the years, as many of you all know. The Tribune is owned by Alden Capital, so they really are run by a business, right? And most media have always been run by a business, from Colonel McCormick to all sorts of media, Hearst, everybody. But there was much more fierce competition in the marketplace. So even if one owner had this huge bias, there were so much more voices out there. interestingly, now we do have a lot of diverse voices. They just don't have the capital to reach the folks that Joe Rogan can. But the best thing is they all have the potential to. And that's where I think amplification of local media can be done. I think at scale, a lot of these outlets, Respire Media is a great example, have a niche impact. Borderless Magazine and Justice Watch, all these organizations have their kind of niche audience. But if we can work together to amplify them, their audiences can grow and therefore make them stronger, because the delivery mechanism now is almost free, compared to printing papers and mailing them or delivering them, and high cost airwaves, et cetera. So at least we have that as a possibility. The problem is that access to high speed internet and smartphones and all of that is not equal in this country. And Democratic administrations had been working towards making broadband a more democratized service, a more utility. And that does create discrepancy, which is why I do support and think that publications that are still in print are vital to a democracy, because there are people for whom print is it. There are also people for whom English is not their first language or may not be their language at all. In fact, a significant portion of the Chicago area are not literate in English. And so there are many foreign language outlets in Chicago that are either online or in print over the airwaves that are also part of this ecosystem. So I think we have to figure out ways to support all kinds of media, who are free, who are independent. Now, there are some foreign language media in Chicago that are owned by their state governments. Some Chinese media, for example, is not independent. But there is a relatively new Chinese organization, social service organization, that's standing up media as part of what they do, because they've realized the need for an independent voice for the Mandarin speaking community. So um, it's all over the place in terms of definitions. I think the problem we've had with some of these national organs is they've never really had to face an administration trying to control them in the way that this one is. And we see how fast they cave because of their business interests. They want mergers, they want, favorability, they want all these things. And in the past, it's been a compromise. It's certainly they have been not perfect. But this time we are seeing the collapse of formerly very incredible investigative media organizations at the national stage. And so we have to rely on the local. And to me, that's where the free independent press is mostly living today.
So, but that independent free press does not have the bully pulpit yet, that a New York Times or the Washington
Well,
Post.
it depends on how you define press, because I agree that if a traditional press outlet or a legacy outlet or even a local press outlet, but there are voices out there that are independent, like Heather Cox Richardson. She has 2.5 million subscribers, and that is probably on par with MSNBC on a nightly basis, right? So how do we curate and aggregate the existing voices that are reaching lots of people, and then also make sure that others are growing? To me, I'm focused on the local, but there are some national voices that are kind of making it through the noise. Um, the problem always has been the right wing is so good on message, and whether it's on the airwaves with Rush Limbaugh types, or Joe Rogan's, they're just not. We aren't as message disciplined because we have opinion. We actually are independent, so we don't align on every issue, and we don't all listen to the same radio show. And there's been attempts to have independent radio shows networked across the country, and then almost all have failed, because that's not how most independents and Democrats see themselves, as this like very monolithic, we're going to support a few big outlets kind of approach. So that doesn't mean we can't do this as a bunch of uh, independent people all over the place still agreeing on some things, and some media. If you take all 114 independent outlets that we surveyed, they reach millions of people. But how do we get messages out through them to them, to make sure that their stories, their great story, Borderless's great stories on immigration, are being
Right.
heard beyond their base, right? That is part of the dilemma we're all working on.
And Lori, I'd love to answer that same question as well. And again, just context, things weren't perfect before. The Democratic, formerly called progressive, people who believe in democracy have always been behind on the technology side. I can remember when folks were using mimeographs and, other people were well ahead on the digital space and reaching their audience in that way. I think that there's use of AI that disrupts elections, and is agents of disinformation are able to act with more rigor, or actually more robustly because of that advantage. But I still think that when we expand our horizons of what it means to be in journalism and media, that there are some great resources. And, again, I'm on the board of the Headline Club Foundation. I talk with my colleagues there about being more thoughtful and open around podcasts, about, understanding that our as next generations come in, this is a multi-generational effort, that we've got to understand that there'll be new delivery mechanisms. I think that there was an attack even going back to the first Bush administration, and going back to when we were allowed to have um, people embedded who were selected by administrations versus the traditional news outlets covering wars. This is a slippery slope that has been occurring for some time, and so we're fighting a bit of a rear guard action. In fact, I can recall that it was when Katrina happened that the press found its heart again, because during the Bush administration, people were worried about their credentials, and that was the power that the White House had over journalists. That if you do this, you won't have your credentials. And so this has been happening for some time, but I too will share some resources that, are out there for people to get their news. Remember, we just want to double check, what is your charter? Are you committed to, facts? What is your ownership structure? Who who do you report to? And public broadcasting, public radio is under attack. And you can add to that, and I think we all have to defend all of those spaces that bring us together: public radio, public television, public libraries, places where anyone can get the facts are at risk, and they need to be supported. But in the meantime, the work that's being done on the local level and in innovative spaces, a former WBEZ person is reaching her community in California with text, and reaching an immigrant population in their language, the stories they want with text. We had started to see more storytelling and owning of the narrative by indigenous communities. I think that those battles will continue, but it is going to change how we define media. And I think the end result is it accurate? Is it factual? What's the point of view? That transparency is where the free journalism and media is going in the future.
Thank you. Well, before we get to Marianne's question, which I think is a really important one in the chat, I think it is the whole question of how has the media changed in the last 10 to 25 years? How do we define this media ecosystem? And you did discuss a bit, Sylvia, about how do we know who we can trust? And so what is the media, Tracy? I mean, how do you define that today?
I think ever increasingly, I define it by the journalists themselves. A lot of them kind of migrate around to different outlets anyway. So a lot of what I curate on my day-to-day news is journalists that I follow, who are respected and I know I can trust, right? The individuals, they kind of bring their cachet to the publications they're at. And then, of course, in my mind, there are legitimate publications locally and nationally that I know I can trust from years of reading them. I don't always agree with them, but I know I can trust the facts. And I have to say, even lately, I'm not that trusting in the New York Times, because part of it isn't about facts; it's about tone and about proportionality. And from Hillary Clinton's first campaign on, I have not trusted their proportionality. But lately, it's really felt, a lot of what that coverage is very frustrating. So I do tend to focus a lot on who the journalists are and then the brand names that I know I can trust. And I certainly curate a whole lot through Blue Sky. Um, I do think that journalism itself has changed so much. It's unrecognizable, really, from when I started in 1984. But as Sylvia said, it was not perfect then. My mom was forced out of the Chicago Tribune in the 60s trying to cover serious news. And I know that in 1984, I couldn't be an openly gay journalist in Chicago at any mainstream outlet. So it was never perfect for anybody that wasn't cisgender, white, straight man. Um, the wonderful thing now is the diversity of outlets out there is incredible. So now the question really is how do we make sure that there's different kinds of business models for what works? No, don't force outlets into nonprofit status. That's the one thing I say constantly. Nonprofit status is just a tax status, and it isn't right for everybody, and especially right now puts a lot of people in a vulnerable position. But the other thing it does is it takes ownership control away from people, and it doesn't allow for the passing of generational wealth. So there are many reasons to look to what model works for each outlet separately. Press Forward Chicago will fund for-profit outlets if they have a fiscal agent. Press Forward National will even fund for-profit outlets directly. So we need to look at what their content is and what the grant is for versus forcing folks into a model that may not work. I think I went way long on that,
Yeah,
away
that's
from your
okay.
original question, but that's kind of my feeling is it's a lot of the journalists who I follow the most.
I think you also answered a bit of Mary Ann's question. Thank you. Sylvia, what is your feeling about, because it's the whole thing has changed because now, TikTok, we know that young people are getting more of their news than anywhere is on TikTok. And then is that news?
Well,
Is
life is change. Life is change. Sustainability is change, and making space for what the people who follow us want to do is important. And so, again, is it factual? Is it well written? Are there checks and balances? Are there editors? Are there people, if that kind of structure is there, there was a time when in my legacy shops, we poo-pooed what we called solution journalism, and we poo-pooed community journalism. And places like the Society of Professional Journalists and others, there are lots of credos and charters that you can take a look at. But in the end, are you serving to provide people with information that they can use to make informed decisions that impact their lives and their communities? Like that is, important to me. Are you serving to give people actionable information that's going on in their community, from a school board to resources that are available? That is important. On the national and global level, we were having a conversation, some of us, Mary Ann McMullen was there, with some foundations and people from various spaces in comms, talking about the Wall Street Journal showing up differently. Who would have thought that there would be a time when the Wall Street Journal might be giving you facts, and the New York Times is, nervous? Or ownership is always an issue. Ownership of, the Washington Post is a challenge. But we can go back to Mrs. O'Leary's cow. That trope started because of, racism against Irish people at the Tribune. And that family got an apology, many, many years later. So it really is about being an informed consumer and being open to new ways of getting your news, and knowing there's some shifts. I'll just make this a little bit quick, but there was a time when if you wanted to worry about your issue, you worked directly with nonprofits on that issue. Now, just like climate change is coming for all of us, the crisis in our press, in our media, and how we get factual information is such that everybody has to partner and find a way to support these entities, public broadcasting and others, because it really will take that kind of collaboration and urgency for it to survive. So that the new partnerships, the new collaboration, the expanding the horizons of what we think goes together is something that has to be on the table. And I just want to welcome, I see Kirkland Townsend, I told him that men were welcome. And Kirk and I are both part of Trinity, and Pastor Otis Moss III put out an amazing booklet about Project 2025, months ago, and probably one of the best written resources that I've seen. So getting factual information, sharing it, I'm agnostic about it, but I know that our democracy does need a free press.
Yes. And have you at all, Tracy, with the organization nationally, looked at like a good housekeeping seal of approval for fact checking for these organizations? Because again, with the media changing and evolving into social media, into all these voices that are out there, you can, again, I reference TikTok, you can see a whole page in front of you of like 100 or 1,000 voices of people saying all these things. With the loss of fact checking, and as we keep talking about the need for factual information to have an informed electorate, have you guys thought about doing something, creating something?
So the Press Forward National is run, separately, but I would say that probably would not be something that an organization like Press Forward would do. But by the fact of supporting organizations and listing the organizations they would support, that might serve as a de facto kind of seal of approval, because the organizations certainly would be vetted to be funded and to make sure that they are fact-based organizations, nonpartisan, fact-based organizations that are working in the news and culture space. So I think that would be a really difficult thing to do, to create kind of that kind of seal of approval, because it could get corrupted so easily. The national is really looking a lot at infrastructure. This round of grants, they're doing about $20 million worth of grants that are about infrastructure. They had over 500 applicants from across the country. I saw just a slice of them, and they were really heartening to me. They often were partnerships between 2 or 3 organizations. Like, let's say in Idaho, there was one that was looking at migrants, a program that worked with migrants, an academic institution, and a traditional legacy media to create some training of storytelling. And there were many, many other existing and new ideas that were presented to make strong ecosystems in regions across the country. I didn't see the Chicago area ones because that would have been a conflict, but there were just really terrific ones I saw from around the country. So that's their mission, is to strengthen ecosystems on a local level, usually in partnerships, but sometimes directly to outlets. They did give a first round of grants across the country, at least one in every state of the country as their first round. So they're going to keep iterating what their goals are. They're also working on messaging that we'll be able to share for our own messaging and fundraising work. The goal in Chicago area is a $20 million fund that lasts 5 years. It's halfway there, and it's about a year and a half in. So 3.5 years left. That doesn't mean it won't continue, but that right now is the lifespan. Might turn into an endowment at the end. The idea is really to try out new ideas. And on the business model question, again, we don't want to create a new single point failure in philanthropy. We don't want to create a one size fits all solution. But one of the things I know from all my years is that advertising is still around. It's just not in local media. So one of the things we're trying to do is look to see about standing up some kind of test in Chicago, where we go back to the media rep firm idea, and one of the larger organizations that already does advertising sales, could they also sell for other media as a kind of rep firm working with agencies and corporations for a business case? And to do that, we need the demographics of the outlets. So luckily in our survey, the vast majority of the outlets are looking to get accurate demographics about who they reach, which once they have those, they can use that for many things in fundraising and revenue raising and advertising. So we're going to try to strengthen them on their back ends, their data, their demographics, et cetera, for them to be able to do things on their own. But we're also going to try to create some solutions that are long lasting, that can bring back revenue from other sources or bring new revenue in. Like, some of them are just not set up for donations. They're not set up for fundraising in any way because they were so singularly dependent on one kind of money, whether that was philanthropy or advertising.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit about the advertising. I think we have to just look at the term revenue, and where does that come from overall? And the city of Chicago could be a part of the solution. There was, before executive orders got, totally a bad name, there was an order with the previous administration to try to bring some of the funding and advertising from government agencies to some of the alliance members. And conversations are like, how does that look? What is the firewall? What is the benefit both to the audiences and the communities and to the outlets? But that is another source of possible funding in the future. And again, there are member models. I was around to help start a subscription base for the late Catalyst education publication, before Chalkbeat. And I think that people who love good journalism and fact-based journalism have to get used to paying a little bit a month to help it survive. The problem is it's very hard to do that retroactively. And, I watched the New York Times and other folks when they were struggling with this, about 10 years ago, trying to figure that out. But it is, true that put your money where your belief is part of the deal.
So what do you both think that we as activists and advocates do to support and help protect a free media and journalists?
Yeah, and I'm looking at Anne, and I apologize because I'm not looking at the chat a lot, but I do see Anne Sabolskis with her question, is smaller better? I think like Tracy touched on this, you can't be prescriptive about you should be nonprofit, you should be large, you should be small. We are, by way of full disclosure, in addition to the other hats I wear, I'm on the advisory for Press Forward, and we really do look at the segments of budgets of $1 million or less, budgets of $1 million to two something, and each space has its own needs, but sometimes smaller can be agile, and it can be fast, and it can beat bureaucracy. Chicago Tonight, we used to say we do it great because we do it late. And we did it late because we didn't have the ability to do it fast. The microwave truck was often broken, and getting from 5400 North St. Louis onto the scene could be challenging. I think knowing what you want to consume, what you need to know, spreading the word about good resources that may often be unknown, of course, supporting them financially. A shared set of facts is going to continue to be a challenge because there's so many professional entities trying to shape the narrative. But that's why folks like you that really care, that will read deeply, that won't just skim the headlines, can continue to help spread the news, and then be open. So few young people get their news from television. You know, if you talk to a class, you'll find that they won't even know. On the PR side, I would ask my staff to, reach out to WGN. They didn't know what the call letters were. I mean, it is a new world. But where are there people doing good work in that new world? Come out of a comfort zone and try to find those spaces is also part of what you can do, in addition to supporting all of the entities that are under attack.
And how do you see us working with the media today to cover our issues, Tracy?
Let me go back and answer a little bit of the other question. And it's interesting. You'll see in the survey that we'll put out a little while, and by the end of May, that there are quite a lot of outlets that operate under 100,000, and a significant portion under 1 million. So helping them is actually not that heavy a lift, right? They don't need proportionally a lot, and they can work together to share, how they use fractured officers, whatever fractional officers, and other types of things, right? It won't take a lot to help the really small ones. It's a heavier lift to help the BZs of the world, and sometimes. So Lori, what was your question then about?
Well, it was today with, how do we work with this evolving media to cover issues, the issues that people on this call care about?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's the journalists, and then as Sylvia said, subscribing to the papers that you, even if it's $5 a month. This shows funders, they have support, right? It's a cycle, right? The funders are looking to see who is viable and survive and will survive and thrive, and so your support means a lot. In those even $5 a month, etc., shows a commitment to those publications. The other thing is amplifying it. So if you see good news, share the, meaning stories, whatever you want to call it, accurate news, share that among your networks. Don't be all reliant on social media, meaning I think you should all be building your email lists. That may be the only way we're going to be able to communicate, even if we have that. We may not have Gmail, even if Google decides to pull that out from under us or censor it. But we do have to find ways that we're communicating separate from the platforms. That said, one of the best ways for these outlets to grow their lists is through social media advertising. And then they own their list, right? Not their people that follow them on Facebook. They have to pay to reach those, but you can use social media to grow your email list. And so there are ways that we're training and encouraging outlets to grow their owned lists, which is their email lists. There's just so many different strategies out there that are working for the right wing that we need to figure out how to mimic, game those algorithms to get people on YouTube, which is the number one platform for a lot of these folks. Joe Rogan may have a lot of podcasters listeners, but he has a tremendous YouTube following. And so how do we get Borderless and Injustice Watch and all these other organizations a little more tech savvy to be where the audience is, where those young folks are? So yeah, again, there's no one answer here, but I do know that Press Forward National and all almost 40 chapters of Press Forward are part of what we hope will be solutions. But there's lots of other great folks that are trying to think about this on an individual basis. All I can do is follow the people that are doing accurate stuff, support the ones if I can financially, and then amplify their work to all my networks when I find good stuff.
And Lori, just to your question about getting the word out, some of it is the same. We know that I can look back when I went out with a audio person, a camera person, a producer, and myself as a correspondent, and then it went to like send the camera person and bring back the press release. But creativity around the type of events, creativity around building relationships. Journalists still want relationships. They still want to hear from you. They still want your support and your information to take to their editors and to be your advocate inside. And so those things really aren't changing. I just think that the creative use of events, the creative use of partnerships, the creative use of that constant marketing and relationship building doesn't go away. It's just a different, the old, like, use this list and call these people the day before your event may mean following them on social, because often journalists, we talk about TikTok, but there are journalists that are live tweeting, and the shrinkage of their pool of colleagues means that part of their job is to take pictures while they're there and to post while they're there. So really curate your list of good people. I'm going to put in the chat just a few um, places that you can look. Some of this comes from conversations that we were having. I encourage you to do that. Um, I think that please be careful when you are sharing. There is a tendency, and I'll say that this is somewhat generational, to share, look at the first few lines and share it, and then it's not accurate or it's not true. So just, do that extra due diligence. I know this is a very sophisticated group, but that is another way to be helpful. When it's a good story, share that good story. The New Yorker is incredibly expensive, but they do some outstanding long form work that is worth looking into and sharing as well. And support your libraries, because you can find so much media there, and it is a space that is part of this conversation around keeping democracy and access to information alive.
Yes, well, that's all really important. I think, again, some of the comments here, I just want to go back to briefly from Ori, who is very concerned about disinformation, and then from Mary, that is Stoner Saunders. And again, that whole issue of fake news. And are there any strategies to combat fake news from a legislative or legal perspective? But just the whole issue of how can our democracy survive without a shared set of facts? And thinking about that, I think that has to be something that you think about a lot, Tracy, with the work.
Yeah, and there's no legislative solution here that wouldn't rebound right in our faces. So we have to, and we do know that this isn't just an American problem. We know that many other players were flooding the zone with disinformation. Um, Regulation isn't going to get our way out of this. Amplification of facts and correct information is the only way to drown them out. And again, I don't really have the exact solution. All I know is the only way to counter it is our own making sure that those who are trying to do the right thing, doing traditional media through a diverse lens and all the other things, are amplified and supported. They are using tools that we can use. So how do we make sure that the folks that are reflecting our views, I'm trying not to use the word fact, but it's difficult because it's always been a distorted lens. There is no such thing as objectivity. I fought my way through college fighting my journalism professor, saying there's no way anybody can be 100% objective, but you could try as hard as you can to make sure you're being accurate. And so there are more of the people that want that out there that are not participating in the public square, that if they did and they flooded the social airwaves with shares of accurate, sometimes great feel good stories, but from accurate sources, right? A feel good story from Mother Jones, if they exist, then people get to know Mother Jones. And then when they do a great investigation, and other, right, like, help the brands you like by sharing the work you love, whether that's an individual journalist or an institution.
Yeah.
Sylvia?
I agree with that. Follow the people that you know are doing good work, and um, be open to the container that it might be placed in. Uh, Understand that there's a bit of a new world where, with purchases of affiliates around the country, what in some small places that CBS or ABC or that national affiliate may now be owned by someone who is being prescriptive about how news is covered. So, being open to those new ways is something that I can't repeat enough. Um, and just support what you believe in and ask questions. The most important thing, though, that I want to leave you with is be an agent of calm, be an agent of resilience. As a Black woman in America, there's been many rivers to cross. And this is hitting folks in new ways, but it is not new. There is probably definitely more danger because of Congress being potentially asleep at the wheel and other factors, but calmly give yourself grace to understand and consume information because there are strategies. If you look at old propaganda books, I used to teach this stuff. Shock and awe is part of it, overwhelming is part of it, having people feel like they're on the back foot, and always unstable is part of it. So, to the extent that you can give yourself grace to be still, breathe, and be able to understand and consume information, you'll be better able to be an agent of liberatory messages and an agent of positive and factual or accurate information. So it's both what you do at the macro level, local level, and the very personal micro level that is going to see us through this season.
Well, I feel like saying namaste to you, Sylvia.
I'll say thank you.
Well, thank you
Amen,
very,
and say a say.
yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really think that we covered quite a bit of ground today. And unless there are other key questions in the audience, I think we're going to say goodnight. But I do want to say, Tracy, Bame, you have really been through the wars. You've really, I am so admiring of all of the places you've been and the knowledge and how you're sharing your knowledge to try and build the infrastructure. And big shout out to you and to Sylvia Ewing, who has been an incredible voice for and support for so many women in so many different places. And you have been a really important, and that you're now at Public Narrative, having helped to start the community media workshop, which grew into Public Narrative. Just really grateful that you are there to work to continue its important work. So thank you to both of you.
Well, and Lori, let us thank you as well. I am impressed that you moderated. So thank you for that. And thank you to all the friends from CWTA. We need you. Um, Mentor who's following you. Mentor your next generation and know how vital and relevant you remain.
Well,
Thank you all very, very much. I saw Jane had her hand up. Jane, did you have a question?
Oh, no, that was just a clapping
Oh, that
for
was,
all of you. I did have a question that I put in chat, but I don't want to, so now, Jackie, that you prompted me. So let me just quickly, and I know Laura, you closed it out, but I'm just really interested in any of your overall sense of how are we doing in relationship to getting our stories out comparatively to the right-wing media, who for decades had a head start on us.
Sorry, I can't see who's speaking, but
that
I'll
was Jane
say,
Ransky.
okay, I'll recap really quickly. We're behind and we've been behind. We've
Yeah.
we've been behind since Richard Vigueri. You know, we've been behind since the moral majority because we try to be fair, we try to be ethical, and there are also, you know, we need to collaborate more. Um, but I think that this is why I talk about the next generation. I think there are people who don't bring some of our past history and have new ways of doing things. But if you pick different demographics, we're strangely behind with some young white males. We're behind in a lot of spaces, and the attacks on public media, um, which reaches some of the small rural spaces, is not helpful. So we're behind, but we have innovation, and I will tell you that I think Chicago will be a roadmap for others to follow. But you know, Tracy, I can't be more honest. We're behind.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, one of the reasons I took this job is because Chicago itself is ahead. And I feel we can iterate things here more quickly and then hopefully be a model where someone in Alaska might see the model we might do on education journalism and want to replicate it if it's right for them. And we're doing a project on immigration journalism with 11 outlets. And so that stuff, maybe we can do the Chicago way and have an influence around the country because we don't have it as hard as almost anybody else in this country. So I have optimism. I want to leave you with optimism because I don't, being a pessimist doesn't help. So I'm going to be optimistic until I'm in jail. That's all I can say.
Well, you can even be optimistic from
I
jail.
could be
Yeah,
optimistic
that
in
could
jail. I'll read
happen.
Martin Luther King's letter from prison.
There you go. Okay, all right. Any other
Thank
questions?
you.
Otherwise, I'm gonna let these wonderful panelists go. I just want to say, if there's nobody else, I trying to see everybody here. With a question, I just want to say, Lori, Tracy, Sylvia, as I said, starting off, I wanted to learn something. I wanted to get a good sense of what was going on and what we can do. And I want to say thank you because you've answered my questions. You've given me at least an indicator of what I can do, so I always, start organizing with number one, myself. So if I can organize myself to do something, then maybe I can bring some other folks along with me. So thank you. Thank you all very, very much. And I do appreciate you. And as we started to talk about at the beginning of the meeting, next week it's the courts. What's happening? Do we still have a judicial system? Is it going to survive the immunity that's given to this crazy guy that's in Washington? So again, wonderful panelists with a lot of knowledge that know more than I do, but hopefully we can get them to share their knowledge with all of us. So unless there's something else, I want to say thank you and be in touch.